Alright guys, welcome to a new series I like to make on some of my other collections I have around here. I'm sure you guys know the elevator parts collection, or at least used to know it, for those who were here when I did a lot of that stuff. For long-time viewers, you may also notice that we're in a different location today. Normally we film in the other room, but I don't think we've ever filmed in here before, at least not at this place. This is the former elevator parts room. It has since been converted into an office, and now I have this desk and I can film things on it. I have this nice light. It's perfect. I'm really happy to have been able to renovate this room into a new place to do some videos. Anyways, not a lot of people know this, but I really like vintage calculators, and given I have a math disorder, I kind of have to rely on these things to do my everyday things, because I can't do math in my head. It sucks, if you were wondering. Now, my reasoning is, if you're going to have to use a calculator for life, you might as well use one that you actually enjoy using, not a piece of junk you can buy for $20 at Office Depot. And that's kind of how this collection started, and now I have a pretty decent sized one, so I think it would be really cool if we could look at a lot of these things in a bit more detail and show how cool these things can be. Now, today we're going to be starting off with the oldest calculator I have, at least oldest electronic calculator. Gotta put that in. This one is from 1968, and it's been my daily driver calculator for quite a while. It may be old, but it does its job perfectly, and we're going to take a look at it, since this is also my favorite one of the bunch. But I think we'll see some pretty cool ones later down the road as well. So, yeah, let's begin. Today we're taking a look at this old Sharp calculator. There we go, gotta put that into frame. There you go, I hope you guys can see that. It's a Sharp. If you're wondering, that badge is metal. You'll be noticing that theme throughout this calculator, actually. The metal. The housing is plastic. As you can see, it says electronic calculator on the dust cover. Let me move the camera for you so you can see that. Notice it has the really old Sharp logo. They actually changed that not long after this calculator was made to the new logo. And this one actually has both logos. That's the current Sharp logo, or at least a variant of it. That's the old one, which I think is kind of cool, actually. We can look around the calculator as well. Here's a side view of it. Notice this design where we kind of have a gradual slope up, then a sharper slope up, where the display is. I don't know how this thing gets so dusty. I dusted it earlier today. And back here we have the data plate right here. I hope you guys can see that. I may need to zoom into that as well. There we go. You got a data plate, gives you all your information. Now, one way we can date this calculator is, first of all, 22C, that means it is a third revision unit. Hayakawa Electric Co. is what Sharp used to be called before they renamed to Sharp in 1969. So this is a 1968 or before unit, probably 1968, since that's when these came out. As well as that, we have the power plug. Now you can see it probably, these two pins right here. It looks standard, but trust me, it's not. It's proprietary. And finding a cord for it, well, you can buy replacements that will work. That's what I did, but it's not going to be a perfect match to the cord that this would have come with. You can still find the Sharp cords, but normally you have to buy them with the calculator, and right now I really don't want to do that. So I have one that works. It'll work for the time being till I can get a Sharp cord. As well as that, we also have this weird plug. Now, if we pull this plug out and the calculator was on, the display would blank and the calculator would be bricked. So if you ever see one of these Sharp Compets and it has this plug, make sure it's in the calculator, because if it's not, you'll probably never make the calculator work again, because I don't know what kind of wiring is in this thing to make it work, but whatever it does something in the calculator to make the display work, and I wouldn't recommend shorting it out, because I don't even know what voltage is on that pin. It's probably 120. If you remove this part, there's an additional connector in back for a unit called the memorizer, which would make this calculator a programmable calculator, which is pretty cool. All it does is it just sends keyboard signals through the plug rather than through the keyboard, and that's how it accomplishes programming. As well as that, you have instructions for if you want to service it, because this was made in an era where we serviced things when they broke, not threw them away and bought a new one. And like most old calculators, if you get one of these and it doesn't work, always check the fuse in them. That's usually what fails first. Here's the other side, dust cover. Now we can look at the front again. And now we'll turn it over. Very gently. This thing weighs about 13 pounds. It is not a light calculator. On the bottom here, a lot of these old calculators have it, especially these early ones. there's a handle built into it, a very solid metal one, so that way you could carry this thing around. You kind of need it for this weight. You have these thick rubber feet on the bottom here. As well as that, you have these screw taps right here. This was because this calculator would have costed the equivalent of around $10,000 today. Very expensive, I know, but these things back in the day, this was something, if you got it, this would be a really good gift from someone. Like, only the richest people would have these things in their companies. You would not have one of these at home back in the day. And these were to bolt the calculator to the desk so someone didn't steal it back in the day. This one appears to have not been bolted down. As a matter of fact, this one looks like it wasn't used very much, so I'm almost wondering if it was used for 10 years, stuck in a closet, and that was the end of that. And then it was found on eBay by yours truly, untested, and I took a gamble, and to my complete amazement, it worked perfectly out of the box. I did not expect that. Thought it would need a new fuse, but it didn't. I still replaced it anyways, but hey, it worked. Now I can remove this dust cover, and we can see the calculator itself. That's what it looks like. Inside the dust cover, we actually have, although it's not the full manual, it has instructions on how to use the calculator. There you go. You can pause that if you'd like to read it further. And now we have the calculator itself. We got 4 rows of keys. Now this was made back in a time when there was no real standardized layout. I mean, there still isn't today, but nowadays, generally, most calculators will follow a very similar layout. This was made back when we were still experimenting with that. But it's actually pretty similar to a modern calculator layout, all things considered. You have the clear keys and constant key in one row, the number pad. It's worth mentioning that these keys are great. They're, in my opinion, the best keys ever made. This keyboard, if they sold it for computers, I would buy one. It's really good. I love this keyboard. Next, we have all the operations. We'll get back to that one. Right here, addition, that also is the equal sign button for everything else. I don't know why there's not a plus on it. There's a subtraction button. If you're wondering how this all works, this runs like any adding machine if you've ever used one of those. Most of these old calculators use adding machine style buttons, and they just do things like an adding machine, so it's not hard. I'll show you how to do it in a moment. And after this, any adding machine will work the same, even modern ones. And next and last, we have the memory row. We also have a prominent Compet 22 badge. This unit was the 3rd batch of Compets Sharp made. These were a pretty big technical feat because in the older units, you'd have a massive portion sticking out the back and all the cards would plug into that. And that would be the logic for the calculator. But this unit, Sharp was finally able to condense that all down to one main board and then a separate display board, which for the time made this thing much smaller than any previous Sharp made calculator. And Sharp, from what I can see, they were definitely the company who was pushing the limit on calculators every single time they made something. And this one definitely shows that, given that this is 1968, and you're going to see just how advanced this thing is. As well as that, the numbering system for these things is terrible. The 22 is the highest end model of the range. How I got it? Luck. Someone was selling it cheap. I don't think they knew quite what they were selling. But you also have the Compet 23, which doesn't have the memorizer. You have another model with 14 digits and no memory. That might be the 23 too, I don't know. And then you also have the 17, which is a 12-digit version of this calculator with no memory, and the 16, which is the 12-digit with memory. Doesn't make sense. I don't know why they did it that way, but they did. And that's Sharp for you. So yeah, anyways, now we're going to take this cord. I will show you. You can buy these things. I've seen them called Celestron power cords, old HP power cords. You can find them on eBay usually. If you can't find them right now, I'll pop some links in the description. If you have one of these calculators and want a cord for it, this will work on most of these things. It's not a perfect fit, but it'll work and at least be able to power the calculator so you can test it and hopefully find an actual cord for it at some point. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and plug it in. We'll be right back. Alright guys, as you can tell, we've now got it plugged into my not-so-trustworthy surge protector. Another story for another day. Anyways, let's turn this calculator on. Now, some of my keen-eyed viewers who know their display technologies may know what this thing is going to have here. I'll even let you see it once the camera readjusts its white balance there. Let's turn it on. It's a Nixie calculator. Pretty cool, right? Now, this one, you kind of have to clear it out before you use it. These older calculators, that is pretty common. They don't have clear on power circuitry, so they just display gibberish when you turn them on. Nothing wrong with the calculator. I have other calculators that do the same thing. That's just kind of how these things work. So yeah, now it's ready for us to go. We can put any number we want. Like that, or like this. See? Any number. It's ready for us to go. So anyways, let's demonstrate the operations of the calculator. Let's say we want to do 2 plus 2. Enter 2 plus 2. There you go. Added it. Let's say now I need to do some subtracting here. 9. Now, on a calculator you'd press minus, but if you do that here, it makes the 9 negative, and if I did 9 minus 3, for example, it's negative 6. See, it's not wrong, but that's not the answer you want, and that's not how you're supposed to do it with adding machines. What you're supposed to do is 9 plus, we tell it's positive 9, 3, and we're going to tell it to negative 3, and there you go. Adds negative 3 to 9, and you get the correct answer, 6. As well as that, we can do some multiplication and division. Let's say we want to do this problem, which will give us a wonderful answer. Now, 23. Notice on multiplication and division too, it will blank the display when you enter in your operation. It's because this calculator uses a different set of logic for multiplication, division, and addition uses its own thing, which doesn't blank the display. Not sure why. I'll link an article down below as well. Well, it's not an article. It's a collector who collects these things who has more information on these things than I do. I'll put that down below as well if you'd like to read it. But anyways, let's finish our multiplication problem. Also notice that the multiplication and division key as well light up. The plus keys do not. Or at least plus and minus, they don't. Anyways, it does our multiplication. The display goes crazy because one thing I like about this thing and many other old calculators, it doesn't just blank the display when it does the operation. It lets you see exactly what it's doing when it's doing those operations, which I think is really cool. Now we can clear a wonderful number. We can get on with division. Now, this calculator, it is a 14-digit model, and for all the operations you can use all 14 digits, except for division. You can only use 13 for division. That's because this calculator uses the 14th digit as a counter. I'll show you what happens though if you try to use all 14. We'll do something that most people do to speed test their calculators. All 9s divide 1. We'll divide it by 1. Again, division key lights up. Let's try to divide that. See, it did it, but it's wrong because it couldn't count, so it gave us the wrong number. And if you did it with something else, it would be much more wrong than that. Clearing it out, we can now actually do it and show that it will do the correct answer. Also, for some reason, it doesn't think that's an error, but that's another problem for another day. It's not something wrong with this particular unit. Every calculator in the revision C do that. Now we can do our problem though. Notice how it counts with these 2 digits and then solves it like this. Again, we don't blank the display, so you can see how it does it. A little bit slower on division than some of the other calculators I have, but also pretty common for these older units, so nothing to worry about. We can go ahead and clear it. Now I can get on to what this RC key does. Now many old calculators from the 1960s, late 60s, and 70s tend to have this RC key, and it kind of disappeared around maybe 1973 or 4. Many of these desktop units have it anyways now. I'm not sure why it exists. It's not a very useful key, but perhaps it's for like error checking if that's what you want to do. We can demonstrate it though. Let's say we want to do 58 plus 6. RC basically just lets you see the first number you entered. It switches the registers. And RC stands for recall. And we can still do our problem. You can clear the entry on both registers if you want to do that. So if I want to change the 58 to some other number, it would let me do that and it would still do the problem with the new numbers. So I guess that's what that would be intended for. I don't really know. I've never seen a new calculator with that feature, so I'm assuming most people didn't need it, so it didn't last. As well as that, we also have a full memory register on this calculator, so if I want to add 23 to the memory, there we go, it's now in memory. The memory indicator is down here. It is so faint you probably can't even see it. Perhaps we can see it if we really zoom in and cover this up. There you go, you can just barely see it. It's very dim for some reason. These neon bulbs, I think that whoever used this thing did a lot of memory register usage because it's very faint. I'll show you the error light in a moment, because that one is not faint. But we can add 23 to the memory. You can actually kind of see it flashing on the Nixie tubes, the new numbers. And we can recall it. Oh, look, it's that wonderful number again. Isn't that fun? Now, if we clear the memory and recall it now, there's nothing in there. For 1968, that's pretty impressive that we were able to get a memory register. Keep in mind that we have no chips in this thing. It's just analog circuit. Well, it's not analog. It's early digital circuitry, but no chips, none of that stuff. Nope. Old electronic equivalents to chips is what you will find in this thing, which is honestly amazing. As well as that, we also have this dial. Now, it is right next to the power switch on this calculator. Now, this is what you call a fixed decimal calculator. If you don't know what that means, modern calculators are floating because you can put the decimal anywhere and it will do the problem with the decimal anywhere. These, though, you don't get to choose that. I mean, you can put decimals anywhere, but it'll just cut them off to whatever you have it set to. The maximum this one can do is 6. Now, we have a few options on this wheel. Currently, it's at 0 if we turn it. Now we have 2 decimals, as demonstrated here. Now it moves the decimal place over. If you entered a number, it would move it over 2 decimal places. This would primarily be for cache. Not that it would be too useful, because this thing does not do cache like an adding machine, where you don't need to press the decimal key. It'll just move it over as 100. We can also move that to 3. Now we're at 3 decimal places. 4. Now you may think 5 is next, but no, it's actually 6. Like that. Now let's say I want to add 12. See, it'll move it over for me. And 3. It'll do it, just move it over really weirdly. Turning that back down to 2, get 0, so that's 2. Now we can demonstrate, let's say, an adding machine, if I pressed 121, it would do 1.21, but on this calculator, it's 121. You would think it wouldn't do that, but I guess that this was not... It would probably be an inconvenience for people who were not using this for tabulation, which, honestly, I think 90% of the people who bought this probably were using it for cache, but we may never know. I mean, there probably were some uses without cache, but just interesting that you wouldn't have it on something like this. As well as that, there's also a blank that seems to do nothing. On 0, now I'll show you what happens on 0 if you tried, let's say I did 2.33. See, it'll take it, but if I add 3 to that, it just turns into a 100 because it doesn't know what to do with that decimal. It's 0 decimal places, fixed decimal position, so it'll just cut it off and make it into a regular number. Not ideal. And it'll do the same on any decimal setting if you enter more than you're allowed. So that's kind of how a fixed decimal calculator works. Most adding machines nowadays aren't fixed decimal, but this particular calculator is. Many old ones are. So yeah, I think that's most of the features. The only other feature I can think of is the constant key, which if you don't know how that works on most old calculators, if we did 2 plus 2 constant, it would keep adding it. This one, like many old calculators, constant does not work for addition. It is only for multiplication and division. So if I did 2 times 2 constant, see, normally when this calculator finishes a multiplication problem, the indicator light will go out, but it's still lit, so we can still do the multiplication, and we can do this forever if we wanted to. We can release that. This one's a bit finicky. And see, now if I do that, there you go. It's now done. It went out. This calculator also has some very odd ways of handling overflowing. Most old calculators, if you overflow them, it'll give you an error. And this one, it does do that. See, E is lit up. I will show you that as well. Zoomed in. There you go. That's E. The error light is now on. It's telling us there's an error with the calculator. More specifically, an overflow error. But this one doesn't really care. It doesn't lock up. I can still press numbers. We can go on forever with this. And it'll still do the problem, too. It doesn't care. Newer revisions of this model got rid of the error light, and instead it just lights up all the decimal points, and they moved all the signage to this side. This older revision unit, though, it doesn't care. It'll also happily try 0 divided by 0 for you. It just locks up, and this time it actually locks up, and the only way to fix it is to clear the calculator. We have quite a few in this collection that will try 0 divided by 0 for you. But yeah, that's about all for this calculator. It's pretty cool. I really like this thing. I think that the design is amazing. I've never seen something quite like it. And yeah, it's in pretty good shape for its age, all things considered. And yeah, if there's enough interest, perhaps I'll show off some other calculators in my collection. I think these things are really cool, and I would be more than happy to show you more of them. So yeah, I hope you guys like this video, and I can't wait to see what else the future brings. It's really exciting, and that's going to be all for today. And I will see you next time. Thanks for watching. 'Cause I found my way.